My name is Liandra Bassiane. I am an Agile Coach, and I currently work for a company called Havan Majestic Consultancy. Yes, Havan Majestic Consultancy. So, in presenting this talk, I realized this talk is really late in the afternoon, and people are mostly tired. And I was asking people, like, give me cool ideas on a story that I can tell to get people awake. And I've got one. Actually, I have two. The one is gruesome and the other one is sort of funny. Let me start with the gruesome one. so so I actually cut my finger. So I sliced vertically down, so most of the nail bed is off. And the gruesome joke was, at least I vertically sliced my story instead of horizontally slicing my stories. so, and yes, if none of you guys understand that concept, I'll explain it a bit later in the slide, so that's fine. So the funny one of it was saying like, oh, look at my finger as an analogy. The team is my finger, and they've used the wrong method to slice stories. So they called the doctor, the Agile Coach, to come get them to figure out how to slice stories. But I don't think it's as funny as the first one. All right, cool. So let's get into it. So I'm sure you saw my title is just pretty long. It's Journey of an Agile Coach slash business analyst slash iteration manager slash Scrum Coach, from the hair pulling moments to the aha moments. Somebody actually asked me what an IM is. I just wanted to clarify what that is. They play the same role as a Scrum Master, it's just that they're not methodology specific. So they do the same things that a Scrum Master will do within the different flavor of Agile. So that's what a Scrum Master, an iteration manager is. So a bit about myself. I studied computer science at WITS. Really enjoyed problem solving and working with code at that time. But when I finished my degree, I realized that I'm not as passionate as I thought I would be in writing code. So I saw the recruiter in the company that I joined, the first company I joined, asked me, are you interested in being a business analyst? You'll get to speak to customers and interact with the developers and the product owners. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like me. I'm extroverted, I love solving problems, and I still want to be in the IT industry. So I joined the global consultancy as a business analyst. And on that journey, I also got to do a lot of business analysis and iteration management in your insurance and banking companies in South Africa. Then after that, I traveled to Australia and I worked at a bank. And that bank had been through the Agile journey for about 12 years. So they were pretty mature with the Agile practices. So it was a good experience. And then after Australia, I went to India and I got to coach graduates on learning how to work in this new Agile way of working and working in teams. These graduates hadn't had any work experience. So it was an interesting experience teaching people brand new who don't have ideas around waterfall, and this is just the new way of working. And then after that, I came back to Joburg and I joined Havan Majestic Consultancy. And then I got to do and now I'm doing some coaching at an insurance company. So that's where I am right now. So I'm sure you know, just wanted to reiterate again, like why organizations look at Agile coaches and why they want us Agile coaches to come help teams. And these are just some of the points. So as an Agile coach, they need you to come in to help mentor, guide the team, and you have assumably a lot of Agile knowledge and experience that you can help the team along. So that's just an Agile coach. Then next slide is why this topic. I'm really passionate about Agile. I'm really passionate about working with teams, and you'll see that by my excitement in my voice. And on this journey, directly as an Agile coach or not an Agile coach, there was just a lot of ideas or like misconceptions around Agile. And I just felt this would be a great platform applying for this conference to at least get to talk about them, demystify them, see if everyone also feels the same pains or misunderstandings around Agile. So that's why the topic. So let's get into it. So the format of the talk, the rest of the talk is I'm going to talk through the hair-pulling moments. So these are conversations around misconceptions around Agile. And then the rest of the talk will be on the aha moment. So this is how we went about solving some of these misconceptions. And just to turn up the notch a bit, I decided I'm going to do some improv acting to keep you guys on board. So while talking about the hair-pulling moments, I have 3 characters that I'm going to introduce. And each of them, when I play that character, I'm going to wear the hat. And these characters are having a conversation with me, Liandra, the Agile Coach. So I'm not really going to respond because I really don't know how I'm going to go like cat nod. So it's going to sound like a monologue, but I'm here. So they're speaking to me, just set in context. And then another thing to get the audience engaged is if there's things that I talk about that you can relate to, raise your hand. So you could just do this randomly. Then I'll know like, oh, this is something that actually happened in your team or you've seen as a concept. If I'm talking too fast, because I tend to do that when I'm really nervous, just tell me, slow down, like with your hand, and then I'll get it and I'll actually slow down as I speak. Cool? Cool. Hi, everyone. I am Vanessa. I am a product owner of a big bank company, and we deliver amazing and great experiences for our customers. But there's a couple of things around Agile that I'm not really getting, hey? And I'm going to have a conversation with the Agile Coach around this. Liandra, you keep talking about this agile thing. I've gone through training, and training tells me, Agile is Scrum. If we implement Scrum, that's the definition of what Agile is. So I don't understand a lot of these things you keep bringing around. Yeah. And then, yes, we want to provide like one of the best experiences. Like our customers need to be wowed, and they need everything on it. And you keep talking about, sorry. Oh, you keep talking about this MVP thing. It's not going to work in my organization, this MVP thing. Like, we need this thing of half-baked solution, this thing of like minimum features, not happening here. And then, like I said, I want to have the amazing experience. We definitely need to you keep talking about that UX person, right? There's a department there that has a graphic designer, and they're going to come in and make everything look pretty, and that's their role as UX in the team. Make things pretty. And that's some of my pains, around this Agile thing, but there's actually something I wanted to talk to you about around visibility. I know we are a small department, we're trying to implement this Agile thing, and I'm getting a lot of pushback. I'm getting a lot of conversation from people outside of the Agile team saying, we don't know what you guys are working on. We don't know what value you guys are delivering. You guys are just doing your own thing. You're like that random department doing their own thing. How do you go about solving some of these things? I'm providing visibility to external stakeholders on what we're doing. That was Vanessa. Oh, all right, so that was Vanessa. I'm going to introduce the second character. Our next character is TJ. TJ is a developer. Sorry, I'm the character. So I am TJ. I am a developer. I've been working as a back-end developer for the past 15 years and delivering amazing solutions. And I'm really interested in this Agile thing, but it's just some things I just really don't understand how it all fits together. So I'm going to ask the Agile Coach some of these questions that I do have. So Liandra, we've been working on our stories and so on, but I keep getting one story after another story, and I just don't get the bigger picture. Like, where does this fit into the organization's objectives? How far do we know when we're closer to finishing our scope? It's just like one story after another story. Could you please help us in this? And then, you keep talking about your stories, but me as a developer, I have been most effective in building all the infrastructure stories first. And then we're going to get to all the back-end stories and then all the front-end. Because it doesn't make sense to be doing thin things. What if we don't build the back-end all correctly? And then it doesn't make sense for the front-end. So let's just build every one of those small little tasks. And then we'll get to that front-end. And I'm really good at that. I mean, I've been working 15 years, and I've been promoted and been doing this really good job well. And as we're building, our stories and tasks, I mean, what we've put on our board is we're tracking our subtasks, and then the UX person, they can track their thing, and the stories, they can track their stories. And then we'll get to getting all that done. But while doing this, I'm getting a lot of talk from Vanessa. Vanessa keeps saying she doesn't understand, like, how does this relate to finishing a piece of work? Because she doesn't really understand some of the text infrastructure stories. How do we get her aligned to understanding that over there, those text stories? And yes, you keep talking about this person called a QA in the team. But I write amazing kick-ass unit tests. Like, it's really great unit tests, and our BA does testing. Like, why do we need this additional person called a QA if we are technically strong and we are writing our unit tests, and our BA is getting time to, and our BA is doing the functional testing at the end? What's the purpose of this QA person in our team? Thank you. That was TJ. Next, we have Emily. Hi, everyone. I am Emily, and I am a business analyst. And I have a couple of queries or things around this Agile Coach coming into our team, and I really don't understand her purpose. But anyway, I'm going to have a conversation with her about it. So, Liandra, I have been a business analyst really long. And I just, you should just take the approach of, as a coach, because that's what a coach is. Tell me what to do and then walk away. Go sit there where the Agile coaches sit. Don't come sitting here and monitoring us on how we work. Go sit there. and team is fine. Like, we write our requirements on sticky notes and we put it on the board. Like, why do we need to document? You are the Agile coach. Shouldn't you say that in Agile there's no documentation, right? So why are you making us want to document? And these things around retros, we've been running retros and they've been fine. But this retro thing is not working for us. Like, the team says, and I also say, we have nothing to say at retros, so why do we need to schedule regular retrospectives? Because there's nothing to say, then we're just doing it pointlessly, right? So, in summary, our team is fine. We are delivering awesome software. If it's not broken, why are you trying to fix this? Thank you. So, that was Emily, Vanessa, and TJ. And yes, I put them as developer, PO, or business analyst, but some of these stories actually happen between anyone in the Agile team. So just look at them as personifying, and some of it is a little bit exaggerated, but some of them is really, really true. But personifying some of those things. And I'm sure you now want to know, okay, so how do you deal with situations like that? And the ideas around that. So those are what I call the aha moment. So some of Vanessa's problems were around like the process and just not getting a bigger picture of the context of these things that are going around. And and she mentioned stuff around like Agile is Scrum. So Agile, as you know, brings together all these methodologies so that it can be able to deliver. So your engineering practices, your design, management around software. And and I'm sure you all know the Agile Manifesto, so I'm just gonna jump into the Agile principles. So there's 12 principles, and in those 12 principles, Scrum talks to a couple of them and not all of them. So working your highest priority, working software, welcoming change and requirements. So Scrum actually talks to some of these principles. And when we're trying to implement Agile in our organization, we should think of Agile as an umbrella with those 12 principles and look for the methodologies that can help us assist in implementing those 12 principles. So Scrum, really great for the project management and your stories. Your XP talks to your technical excellence, so we should look at some of the practices around there. You lean around the principle of simplicity and removing waste. So tip was, when we implement, look at Agile as an umbrella and see which practices work for you while trying to adhere to the 12 principles of Agile. And then Vanessa was like, Agile is just not gonna work in our organization. And her understanding around Agile was that it's the minimum features, but there's actually, the sentence is much longer. It's the minimum features that you need to prove your highest value or your business proposition. So for example, we went out to our users, and we're a bank. We went out to our users and they said, we want to have a 24-hour experience. We want to be able to do online banking anywhere, anytime. Then your minimum features or your minimum MVP for that would be building the ability to log in, and then you can send money from one account to another. It wouldn't include things like airtime or e-bucks. So it looks at building those minimum features to be able to prove the business model that people are actually interested in doing 24-hour banking. So that's MVP. And then, out of curiosity, just let me know if these roles are in your Agile team. I'm just curious. Do you have a business analyst? And then you just raise your hand if you do. Cool. Do you have your product owner? Cool. Do you have your project manager? Okay. Do you have developers? Oh, yeah. And then a tech lead / architect. Okay. And then what about quality analysts? Okay. That's good to hear. Cool. And then what about user experience analysts? Okay, there's a couple. Cool, so that's great. There's actually a couple of people with their teams incorporating some of the design. So I'll just recap on what a UX is. So a UX person is not there to make everything look pretty. That's not their role. They play a far deeper and greater role. They will do user research, user testing. They will ensure that we're building the right product according to what our customers want. And they don't just do that once off, so they don't just do it in the beginning, that big user testing. They do it throughout the sprints. They do it post the sprints. So that's why they are part of the team. And whatever feedback they do, they incorporate into our stories and into our builds. So that's the UX person. So don't say that they make things pretty. It'll really offend them. Are there any UX people in the house? Okay. You must tell them. Don't call us the pretty makers. All right, and then this is just 2 things. There's actually a whole lot of things that you could do to encourage visibility on what's happening in your Agile teams. I mean, showcases, for one, which is demos. Traditionally, it was just demoing to your product owner so you can get sign-off, but you can open up your showcases to a wider audience. On the client that I'm on, they actually open up the showcases to all your external stakeholders. So the head of testing, security testing joins, and much higher execs. So they always know what is happening within the digital hub where I work. And then you can do something else called a lunch and learn. So a lunch and learn is just at lunchtime, bring your lunch, and then somebody talks about something. So you could leverage that to talk about some of the processes that you're doing within Agile to the large organization. So one lunch and learn that I did at the client, and this was outside of just the people that I work with, was on retrospectives and why they're important. And actually, out of that talk, there were people that talked about how they were going to incorporate it in waterfall and saw the value. So people start gaining empathy towards the type of work you're doing and the value that you're providing. So lunch and learns are great for that. Okay, and then we had TJ. TJ was really struggling like with the smaller picture, bigger picture, slicing stories and the piece of work and the unit and doing testing. So what I found while coaching and training is that there's a lot of focus around the sprints. I think maybe because of the Scrum part of it, is that we're only looking at the delivery phase of it. But these things that actually happen prior to delivery that creates, that gets the team to understand the bigger picture. So the stuff that I have here that happened prior to delivery, so your sprints and iterations, is something called a discovery. So discovery is, and I've heard the word, lots of people call it different things. I'll just define what I think a discovery is and the outputs of it. So a discovery is, after business thinks, oh, this is something that I want to solve, you get a team of people. Usually organizations really do that, is they get a team of their user experience analysts to go out and do user research. But what you want to do is bring your devs, bring your QA into these discovery workshops and this user testing that we're validating our business needs and what our customers are saying. And that kind of creates empathy and lets them understand the bigger picture of why we're building this. So involve them at discovery. And then after that, there's a workshop called Inception. And in that, it's a time box inception where after we prioritize the pains of the discovery, we solutionize for it. So stuff that come out of that Inception, it's a collaborative workshop with business and developers and the development team, as we look at the customer journeys for the system, some high-level architecture of what it's going to be and high-level estimates for the team. And then that, in turn, gives us our Inception backlog, which is our backlog of stories that we can do our sprints. But that only solves one of the problems, which is them understanding the bigger picture of where the project, why we're here and why we're building this. And after the issue that he also was having is that he was just seeing a flat backlog. He wasn't able to see the bigger picture of how this backlog translates to how far we're in. And with that, you can use a concept called story mapping. How many people have heard of story mapping? Actually quite a bit. Awesome. So out of that inception, so you create a map on the board with the journey the customer is going to take, the different tasks, and divide it into epics and stories. And as we're building on that story map, what you could do to create visibility is, as we're doing like search by keyword, we can just cross it out and show that we've done this and this and this. So you're always seeing the bigger picture, and you're also seeing, like, focusing in on what you're actually building and how far you are in building. And then horizontal slicing. So I'm sure you all know stories, we need to provide value end to end. And I think I heard a conversation just before I joined, which is, I think the conversation was around, like, why do developers want to stick to just building some of just only the infrastructure or only the front end stories? And I think the person said, well, trying to influence this person to change is understand that your role is to deliver business value. And if you only deliver infrastructure, how do you test or how do you know you're actually delivering value? Because your customers can't do anything with databases, a whole entire database normalized. So that's vertical slicing. So yeah, next what I wanted to say is the situation that I was in with a developer where he was vertically slicing. A tip that I think worked is I asked him, because I think it takes a lot of experience and a mindset shift. I asked him, like, okay, it seems like you're working on the story for 3 weeks and we'd split it as a story, but how come? And he said, no, we're building bits of the infrastructure and back end for all these multiple stories, and we just wanted to get it right because we knew the story is coming in the next sprint. And I said, no, we don't need to build the entire back end. What if the product owner deprioritizes the next story. So what happens to all that code you wrote? And then he's like, oh, okay, that's a valid point. We might not build everything. And the other is, like, if you keep building all this for 2 weeks and your BA or even your customer at the end of the day doesn't see anything that you're building, what value does it provide? So let's step back and only think about building what is needed here. But I think what he needed is not that he wasn't open to hearing, he just needed a sounding board to realize that no, he's actually building too much and that's not needed. So I think if that situation happens, just sit down with the developer and just try and understand, like, what are the components he's building, and then, especially from a business analyst side, you'll be able to tell those independent values or stories that are actually within that story. So that really helps. And then developer was complaining that Vanessa doesn't see the bigger picture on what we're delivering because they had siloed and created subtasks. So creating a story, and the story is searched by history and understanding that the whole team owns it. And it's not just the UX person or the BA, and all of us are contributing to that single idea really helps. And then I think Zane had asked me, he's like, I saw you created on one of the the teams that I was coaching. He's like, I saw you actually created these columns, aren't you? And how do you ensure collaboration with this? Like, you have in analysis, so the BA is responsible in making sure the acceptance criteria is there, ready for dev, in testing, ready for demo, in production. It's like, how do you ensure collaboration? Because what if the BA would just stick to writing the stories and doesn't collaborate with the team? And something the team actually did by themselves to ensure collaboration is they defined the definition of complete for each row. And inside that definition of complete, apart from acceptance criteria and wireframe, it was, did you speak to a dev? And did you speak to the QA? And so it involved speaking to other team members to ensure that we're collaborating on that one single story. Cool. So the next one was quality analyst. So the dev felt, he's writing unit tests. Why do we need this additional person called quality analyst? And interesting story is I found on the team that actually said this, the business analyst did do the manual testing, but she never got to it. They only got to it like on the last day of the sprint because she was so busy writing stories. So they actually needed an additional resource, but they didn't want to say anything because they didn't feel comfortable talking about getting an additional resource. So the statement was not really true, but there's some truth in just not understanding what a QA is. And the QA looks at the quality of the system. They don't only just make sure that we're writing correct unit tests. They look at integration tests. They look at end-to-end functional testing. They make sure when we introduce the new story, because it's so fast-paced, it doesn't break the previous things that we've built. So they bring in the quality element of it. And I think also they bring in a different hat that is different to a developer or a BA or a UX. So for example, I feel like this was an example of a QA and another team. They were building an internet banking solution. And the acceptance criteria says, the story was transfer money from one account to another and ensure that in the one account, the amount decreases, on the other account, the amount increases. And the QA had tested all those scenarios, but he thought about a different scenario, which is if you're in the middle of making a payment and there's no electricity, what should happen? So he thinks about all these ideas that are outside of the box, which I thought they bring in that is different. The next one is a bit different, not really process, but more like resistance. Like Emily was very, very resistant, and that will happen where I found as an Agile coach while training where people are just not really on board in this Agile thing. So I think that you should take a hands-on approach. Yes, she kept on saying, tell me and walk away. And I think how I was able to at least build trust with my Emily type situation is I found out, and you find out that when you just speak to the person, you find out that it's not that simple as tell me and walk away. Her reasons, or in my example of my Emily, she didn't want to be looked at as someone who doesn't know what to do. She had gone through Agile training. She had learned about how to do stories, and she didn't want someone coming in and showing that she didn't really get it. So what I did with her is like we sat down and we said, okay, let's just sit down and do this together. And you will present on the stories. I'm just here to make it better for you. I'm not here to make you look like you don't know how to write your stories. I'm just here to help and facilitate you get there. So I think it's very good to just be hands-on and help them and actually write stories with them. But you also have to know when to let go, because then the team and the person becomes reliant on you. And then on the documentation point, which is we should write everything on stickies, there's actually quite a bit of stuff that go into a story, apart from, so imagine happy day scenario. Everybody gets what's on the sticky, we're collaborating and talking. What happens when something happens to you or a new team member comes in? Having some level of documentation means that you can use that as a great onboarding mechanism. So lean documentation just in time. Agile doesn't mean no documentation at all. Just do it when you need it. And this was just example of some things that is really hard to put in a sticky that I found, and stuff that we needed to capture in the team. So stuff around how to get to the story, the narrative, the wireframe, writing down the acceptance criteria, the QA writing some of the test cases, and the devs writing the implementation notes. It's really hard to put all of that behind a sticky. So just put a summary on the sticky, and then maybe on electronically you can add all these. And then I thought I should just mention this. I thought that it was really interesting when we set up the tool for the multiple teams in terms of lean documentation on what we did. So on the share tool, we created just high level for each team. They knew there was a place to put in the backlog and requirements. There was a place to put retrospectives, place called Tech Corner where we put basic documentation for the Tech Corner, so architecture, environment details, and then a UX corner. So this kind of, I think, helps the team think about, just because we're doing Agile, there's no documentation, but lets them know, like, what type of documentation do you need? And by the time these projects were running, these were actually documents that they already had, but at least was on the tool over there. And then, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So, techniques on dealing with someone who's really resistant, especially coming into a team. I found that if you join a team, usually as an Agile coach, you're kind of external to the team. I mean, it's going to take time for the team to get you or start hearing you out. So a technique that I think worked both teams is picking someone to help you influence on the team. So they can be the Agile spokesman. So it's not just coming out from you, but coming out from other people on the team, and they seeing the need for this change. And that kind of like indirectly makes the other people want to change as well. So on the one team, I picked the tech lead was really open to this Agile way of working, and he just naturally, because he was so interested in making it work, he kind of helped with the people who are resistant and helping them along the way. And then another thing I think helped and just dealing with the resistance and understanding when they said if it's not broken, don't fix it, is we introduced speed dating. So speed dating is just a meeting where we give each other one-on-one feedback. So with retro, we're reflecting as a team. But with speed dating, it's one-on-one feedback, and the format of it encourages feedback. So I ask, what of value have I done for you? And then you would tell me what of value I've done for you as a team member. And then I'll ask as well as what things haven't I done of value for you, and how can I get us to a common place? So I used, because it's very, in the beginning I found that just directly asking someone, what's up, what's wrong, can be a little bit too direct. So creating a meeting where we all know we're giving each other feedback kind of warms up the other person to talk about, like, what's up? Like, why don't you really want to do retros? Like, what's going on? Give me context. So it kind of created that one-on-one environment. And then lastly, why should we have retros if we have nothing to say? My first instinct is to respond like, give me one team. that has reached that point where they feel they have no learnings and, they're so perfect. But of course, I didn't say that. That doesn't help. I, so when team members start to say things like this, I think the question should be on why. Why do they feel they have nothing to say? And what I found is people start to have nothing to say in retrospectives because they're tired of the same format, the same formula, what went well, what didn't go so well, what puzzles us. A way to solve that problem is try different retrospective formats. So there's the starfish. And if you're finding even retrospectives are not really helping, you can do a futurespective. So you can go goal-based retros, and we write our nirvana, and we look at action items to get to our nirvana. So that's the formula. Then another reason why people feel that they have nothing to say in retros, and I think this one is common, is they feel that what's the point? Like, we talk about the same thing every single week and nothing is happening. So that one is an easy way to deal with it. So after retro, we write our action items. So include your action items into your sprints. Put it on the board. Hold each other accountable. In the next retro, ask, how far did we go with our action items? And if we didn't, let's have a retro about our action items not being executed. So that helps us going towards like solving the problem of we're having retros and they're not getting executed. We want to talk about the same thing. Then another why could be that, from a team perspective, they don't see the measure of growing retrospecting. They see they measure as a team being high performing as we're just only delivering software. So changing that mindset and telling them that this is an environment of continuous growing, and if you don't make time for it, we're not going to grow, really helps trying to get them away from that mindset that it's just only about delivery. It's also about learning. And then a couple of tips or ideas when you're running retros as a facilitator. Try ask questions around, okay, are you happy? Like, happy is a good one. And what can we do as a team to ensure everyone is happy? Do you feel that our product is bug-free? And how do we go about trying to make sure that we don't get to, that our product is bug-free? Do you feel that all our stakeholders know what we're working on and the value that we're delivering? And that can be items. So as a facilitator, just try and pick up some of the key topics to be able to run the retro to encourage more speaking at the retro. So that was Vanessa, TJ, and Emily, and some of the issues they had and some ideas around solving them. One thing that I want to end off with, I'm already at the end, is that it's continuous learning. You need to be patient as an Agile coach and a team, and pick the things that make sense to you. And yes, I did mention that Agile is not Scrum, but if that's the first, I just want you to get the bigger picture. But if that's the first step, at least you're doing something towards being an Agile team. And thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Your speed dating thing, is that like a whole team exercise?
Yes. So what we did is one iteration would have our retros, the next iteration would have speed dating. And then would have like a matrix. So everyone would sit in a circle just like speed dating and give each other 3 minutes feedback. I give you 3 minutes feedback and the other person gives me 3 minutes feedback. And most people would complain that is not enough time to have a conversation. But we just said it's just a conversation starter so people can start speaking to each other. Any more questions?
Hi, so I'm not a Scrum Master or an Agile Coach. I'm just a code monkey. But there's one person in the team who believes that he understands how Scrum should be run because he was part of a Scrum team at a previous company. And the more I learn, the more I see he has many misconceptions. How do I help him and our team improve with empathy?
Yeah, that's a start. Yeah, how do you help the Scrum Master be a Scrum Master? That's an interesting one. So, I mean, I'm just thinking if I was in that situation and I was a developer, the things that I'll go about understanding is because you've already picked up there's certain problems in the way he's implementing Scrum, and just trying to understand. Okay, so why are you implementing things like this? You know, I've gone to conferences and people talk about things in this way. Can you please explain to me the gap? And then hopefully in that conversation, you're able to enlighten him in the new way of working. And then another thing that you could do, and it's subtle, is you could run a session on stuff that you learned at the conference and ideas, and now the whole team is on the same page on what you learned, and then we can have a conversation around where those gaps are as a team to move forward. Yeah. Anyone else have suggestions for the situation?
In the Agile methodology, is there a place for a project manager? And do they ever clash with Scrum Masters?
I like your question. So, anyway, there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, the first question is there a role for project managers? And then the second question, do they clash with Scrum Masters? So I'm just going to talk from my perspective on how in our teams we had project managers and Scrum Masters, but we didn't call them Scrum Masters, they were iteration managers. So our iteration managers, what they did is they focused internally. So they focused on helping with the rituals, helping the team unblock themselves, but they were more team focused. And what our project managers did were they, especially in the big program, they were like external. So they would assist in helping with governance in the bigger organization and fight the budget and so on. So they looked at everything external to the Agile team. So that's how I saw project managers and your Scrum Masters working together.
Four layers to the whole setup. It also depends on how your organization is like. So you'll find that there's project governance, which determines how you run your projects in the enterprise. And then that also talks to your scaling techniques as well. And then there's project management, which we'll be talking about how do you externalize what you're developing, and how do you maybe do the change management component of it. And then there's iteration management, which is more Scrum. Your iterations, are you delivering on time? Are you sticking to your estimates as a team and all those basic Scrum? And then there's technical practices, which will then determine whether you're using XP, all those things, and then you determine what quality metrics you put in order to deliver Scrum.
Okay,
So if you look at it in those four layers, you'll start to see how each person can still have a role in there.
Okay, what I'm going to say is a little bit controversial. So I do understand that there's those four layers, and probably when an organization is starting, you're probably going to still have to have those layers as we're trying to adjust. But what you want to get to is that you don't have someone who's purely looking at change management. You want someone who's cross-functional, and the way we work encourages change because being agile is change. So you want the entire organization to be open to just the change part of it so that we don't have an individual person doing the change management. And then you mentioned someone who looks at the technical excellence or the matrix around that.
Like you put that umbrella, right? There's Scrum, there's XP. Then sometimes you might find that people are blending two methodologies and all that. So it also depends on how your organization is set up. So sometimes you find that because we have so many practices, people also get confused because you just adopt whatever you found the environment using, and then you don't ask further or you don't research further. And then you start to think that's the only way to do things.
Okay,
only to find that there's broader things on approaching Agile.
Okay, so to that pain, maybe that person's not a project manager. So usually when we were trying to get teams to be more agile, so I'm more from the business side, and I don't have like I can't sit with a team and I can tell them what TDD is, but I don't know how to practically apply it. So normally you would get a technical coach to assist the teams with that, but they won't really be playing a project manager role in that sense.
I think some of the challenges that, because we're in a journey, we shouldn't really, you must see where your organization is. If they're still project managers, you can bring them into the team so that they start to take the agile mindset, instead of them feeling like they're not really wanted in the new setup of agile delivery. And then you start to have resistance because of that.
Oh no, I agree with that. So as long as they don't come knowing that they're going to work that same way, where we're going to be tracking deadlines, as long as they understand that their role, even as a project manager, require some agile training and agile thought and skills. They don't bring with that same skills, because it's different being an agile project manager versus traditionally. Thank you.